So we're back. The last video actually went down really well, so I'm going to keep this up, and yeah, I hope you enjoy watching them and seeing how this all evolves and changes. And you know, anything I say in here is very much this is where we're currently at, this is what we're doing. It might change, we might have to, you know, rethink things. This isn't everything is set in stone. I mean, I kind of hope it is, because most of it's booked. But, you know, if it changes, it changes. And yeah, I mean, I'll keep you updated and see where we're at with it, really. So today's video is going to mainly be about the church and how we went about finding a venue that, you know, we wanted to get married in, and the sort of process we went through, because it wasn't really as straightforward as we thought it would be. Obviously, you do not need to get married in a church. It's not a legal requirement. You can get married pretty much anywhere that's licensed, and, you know, happy days. But for both of us, it was really important to have a church wedding. We've both, you know, grown up going to church, and our faith is something that's really important to us. So we wanted to bring that into the ceremony. It was the natural thing to do. So we both attend Cardiff Vineyard Church. Now, this doesn't actually meet in like a church building. Well, it does, but it's a renovated church that's now an arts centre, which don't actually hold weddings anymore, and it doesn't really have an aisle. So it kind of wasn't really going to work out. So we had to go on a little bit of a church hunt. Now, this sort of, we didn't really know what we were, you know, looking for exactly. Tom knew that he wanted somewhere that was sort of quite traditional looking, and by that I mean kind of, you know, the stone building, the stained glass windows, and that whole kind of, you know, vibe. It's the kind of church he grew up in, and, you know, that was something that he felt quite strongly about. I wasn't really that bothered what it looked like, to be honest. I've, you know, grown up going to churches that meet in school halls, and, you know, just kind of just buildings, not necessarily, you know, a church building. So yeah, it was something that he felt quite strongly about, actually. So of course, you know, we got on the hunt. Now, Tom's mum is actually a vicar in the Church of England. So initially we sort of toyed with the idea of, well, could we get married in her church? Now, it's a beautiful church, gorgeous location, everything's lovely, but it is quite far away from where we live. So we were like, there's going to be a lot of travelling for people, and also, like, you know, it would involve sort of getting married very close to, like, Tom's house, and I think he was a bit like, oh, but I wanted it to be in Cardiff, I pictured it being in Cardiff, and all of those things. So we were like, okay, not that one. But she was incredibly helpful with talking us through the different kind of options you have when it comes to churches, and the different kind of, you know, pros and cons, I guess, to each. So because she's a vicar in the Church of England, she knows the whole thing about, like, parishes. Now, I don't really have much knowledge of parishes. Like I said, never really grown up going to a church that had, like, a parish as such in the, you know, traditional sense of the word, which is where, you know, a church will kind of, it will look after a certain area of a town or a city, or it might be a whole village. And if you live in the parish, you're in the parish of, you know, St Mary's or St Andrew's or whatever it might be. So we kind of started looking into that and thinking, well, if we're in the parish of, you know, a church near us, then we, you know, we can get married there. And if we're not, you know, in that parish, maybe we have a qualifying connection. Now, qualifying connections, again, was something that I didn't really know anything about, to be honest. But what they involve is, if you were born in a certain area, if you've lived there for a certain amount of time, or if your parents have lived there for a certain amount of time, if your parents got married in that parish, and then I think if your grandparents got married in the parish as well, they're all things that sort of connect you to that parish. How many times can I say the word parish? So that means that you can get married in that church without, you know, with no bother. So if you're not in the parish of a church, you can still get married there, but there's certain things that the church sort of requires of you, which, you know, is fair enough, you're coming into their building. But one of them is that you would have to sort of regularly attend that church for about 6 months. So obviously we were a bit like, well, we have a church that we go to, and so don't really want to move churches for 6 months just so that we could get married in that building, because also, you know, we have our, you know, the guy who leads our church, James, like, we wanted him to be able to marry us, and, you know, we wanted to be able to have people we knew from our church. Basically, we wanted our church, but we needed a building, was our kind of situation. So it's starting to look like, you know, Church of England, well, Church of Wales, it would be here, churches weren't really going to be an option, just because, you know, they have a few more procedures that, you know, they have in place for very, very good reason. And, you know, I didn't want to be disrespectful of that in any way, or at the same time, I didn't want to, you know, walk into their building and be like, we're taking it over and we're doing all of these things. And, you know, because that's not fair on them either. And that's not, you know, yeah, you can't just walk in, you know, it's like walking into somebody's home and being like, right, this is mine now for the day. Like, you don't do it. So we started having a bit of a look round at the other churches in the Cardiff area that might be available to us. Now, we did find a few, actually, and the way we found them was literally just ringing around. We literally just Googled churches under the postcode we wanted and rang everyone that came up that looked suitable. And I know that might seem a little bit slapdash, but at the end of the day, we just, you know, like I said, we have a church, we just needed a building, and as long as it, you know, would suit our needs and have the capacity to, you know, fit everyone in, and also to make sure that we had a bit of space to have like a little mini reception afterwards, which I'll talk about in a sec. So we started ringing around these churches, and now, similar problem that we had to the venues, lots of them were already booked. So that was a little bit stressful, because, you know, there were a couple that we knew of that we thought would be, you know, which would be good, and they weren't available. And then we kind of had it sort of rounded down, I guess, to two. One was Albany Road Baptist Church, which was a church that some really good friends of ours got married in last summer. So we looked into that one, and then they came back to us and they weren't free. They were free the day before, but not on the day we wanted. So it was just like, oh, well, we can't move. We'd have to find a new venue, because our venue isn't available the day before we've booked it. So then we rang Highfields Church. Now, the reason we'd left Highfields Church sort of till last is because it's not the prettiest from the outside, gorgeous inside, or like it's all exposed beams, and I love it. But both of us have done I've done concerts there, Tom's done lots and lots of CU events there, so it was a little bit like, oh, do we see that as like a wedding venue? You know, we've both spent a lot of time there as students, and, you know, it just wasn't quite sure. But the more we sort of spoke about it, the more we realised, actually, it's perfect location, it's big enough, it's really, really nice inside, there's lots of parking around about, particularly in the summer, because the area is quite heavily, you know, student populated, so they go home in the summer. And also, they have a hall attached to it. Now, the hall was important because we've got a few people who are, you know, just coming to the ceremony, or who are coming to the ceremony and then the evening bit, but we weren't able to fit them in the space for the afternoon part of the wedding. So we were like, oh, we'd quite like to have a kind of like little mini reception of, you know, maybe some like tea and cake or something, like, you know, straight after the service, so we can have a chance to say hi and thank them and have a bit more of a chance to chat before, you know, we all go off one way, they go off another, and then, you know, we see them later or whatever. Also, the wedding's gonna finish at like kind of lunchtime, and like, I know what I'm like when I'm hungry. So, you know, I wanted to be able to make sure that people had enough to eat, and that they were, you know, continue to have a really, really good day, and wouldn't be like, oh, it's been really nice, but I'm so hungry. Like, we've all been there. It's miserable when you're hungry at a wedding, because you've got to like interact with everybody and like be super sociable, and that's really hard to do when you're hungry. And like, I'm like massively extroverted. I took the test and it was like 96% extrovert, and I was like, okay. And I'm not sociable when I'm hungry, so, you know, put that into context. So we really wanted to have some food, is what I'm trying to get at. So we thought about like tea and cake and all those things, and I was like, okay, that's great, and that's really, really nice, but it's gonna be lunchtime. Do people want cake? And also, I'm not a big fan of cake. Don't hate me. It's just not the thing I would go for if I'm like, oh, I fancy a treat. I wouldn't particularly choose cake. But anyway, So we decided in the end that we were going to go for canapes at the church rather than having them at the reception. Now, the other reason for doing that is it's a lot cheaper. Canapes are so expensive. Like, they're like £6 per person for like one of them, and then obviously that adds up the more you add. And I was just like, that's ridiculous. And then so I was sort of processing this plan over in my head, and then some really, really incredible friends of mine were then like, well, we could make them. So they're making our canapes, which is amazing. And obviously I am hugely, hugely grateful. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's what we're doing straight after. Now, when it comes to the actual ceremony part, obviously we kind of had a little bit, we knew what we wanted to do. And again, this involved a lot of people from, you know, our church being involved. Basically our, you know, well, everyone we would want is from our church. So again, the reason why we went for Highfields is because they have been so wonderfully accommodating of, you know, James is taking the whole service, and then they have a registrar. It's going to be, you know, sorting out all the legal bit, and they're letting us decorate, they're letting us, you know, bring our own musicians in and all of that sort of thing. But also, they also offer all of that if you don't have it. So obviously, you know, I'm a musician, that's my career, that's what I do. So I have quite a lot of musician friends, so they're going to be, you know, coming in and doing some stuff. And then our church band are amazing, and again, really good friends of ours, so we wanted them to do it. My brother is a music technician, so he can do all the techie stuff. You know, it all kind of, we've got it quite close. But if you don't have all of that, then, you know, they have a sound guy, they have a band, they have, you know, somebody who can take the service. They have all of that right there. So if you need any of it, you know, or if you need anybody to do any of those things, they're right on hand. You know, they understand that it's, you know, it's the most important part of the day. And, you know, and the fact that people want to come and see probably me cry, him definitely cry, you know, it's just, it's wonderful. And, you know, again, it's personal preference. If, you know, you want to kind of do the vows and get that, you know, obviously it's an amazing moment, and then you want to spend the rest of the day enjoying it with the people that you love, of course, you know, go for your life. And I'm not saying that we don't want to do that. I'm not going to like run off as soon as the wedding's done. But, you know, it's a huge part of the day, and it's something that to us personally is just very, very important. Like I said, our faith is hugely, you know, huge to us, and we wanted to incorporate that into the service in the fullest capacity. And to us, that meant, you know, having a church ceremony and having all of these people around us and supporting us, and yeah, just enjoying the day and setting it up right, I guess, and setting us up for marriage in the best way that we know how. And I'm not saying that like you have to get married in a church for it to be a Christian ceremony. I actually remember, I can't remember if she said it to me or to my sister who got married a few years ago, but I remember my mum actually saying, she's like, you don't have to get married in a church, you know, it makes no difference to us. And I actually really, really appreciated that. I'm pretty sure it was to my sister actually, but sort of, you know, took it on board that, you know, you don't need a church, you don't. But if it's something that's important to you, then absolutely you should go for it. And also, if, you know, if you're not from a religious background, or, you know, whatever, if you don't have a personal faith, but you still feel it's really important to get married in a church, then go for it. People might be a bit like, well, why are you doing that? Isn't that a bit old-fashioned? Or whatever it might be. And the fact is that nothing's old-fashioned if it's what you want to do now. Like, you know, that's to me, that's just the most ridiculous thing that people say when they're like, oh, it's all so old-fashioned. You're like, no, it's not. It's so real. It's still happening now. And just like, it's another rant for another day. But, you know, if that's something that you want, then go for it. Because, like I said, at the end of the day, it's what you want. And if you want, you know, hymns and readings and all the rest of it, then you go for it. And if you don't want any of that, and you still want to make it, you know, personal to you, then again, like, you go for it. But like I said, for us personally, it was so hugely important for us to, you know, bring our faith into the ceremony. And, you know, we believe that, like, God brought us together and he's gonna, you know, help us in the rest of our lives. And so in order to, you know, we need to start that now. We need to start that from the very beginning. Again, I think my whole theme through every single one of these videos is going to be ask questions, because don't ask, don't get. And also, but when it comes to the church, there are certain, you know, certain churches have certain ways of doing things, and you need to make sure that they, you know, if you do have your own, you know, your own pastor or your own vicar or whoever that you want to take the ceremony, just double check that that is okay with the church you're going into. A lot of them will say, you know, you get married here, then, you know, you have our guy kind of thing. I totally respect that. I think that's totally fair enough. But that was a deal breaker for us. So there were a few churches which I actually forgot to ask that question until it was sort of a bit too late. And then it was like, it was a little bit awkward having to be like, oh, right, oh, no, sorry, don't want your guy, want my guy. And it was a little bit, you know, it was a bit awkward. So ask that question straight from the off, you know, who is it who would be taking the ceremony? You might not have a vicar or pastor, and therefore, you know, you need somebody to take the ceremony. So just double check these things, ask the questions, and ask also about how you can decorate the church. A lot of churches are listed buildings, so there's, you know, you're limited in what you can do to the building, and then also, you know, in terms of what they'll let you do. If you are having like a little reception afterwards, check their rules on alcohol in the building. Most churches, you know, won't let you serve alcohol in the building for, you know, kind of obvious reasons. Highfields is like that, so, you know, we're going to do like Schlur and canapes rather than, you know, and that's no problem at all. But it is something that, you know, you need to ask that question before you turn up with, you know, 50 crates of white wine and it's all a bit awkward. You know, it's a building to be respected. So yeah, I think that's basically all that, like, we found, really. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Also, like, Google is your best friend. Like, we just Googled so many things, and obviously asked Tom's mum so many questions in terms of, you know, what can we do, what can't we do, what would she do in her weddings, and, you know, all of that kind of thing. So ask your questions, do your research. If you've always pictured yourself getting married in a church, then get married in a church. You know, it's, to me, it's like, it's just one of those things that really makes a wedding day, you know, I don't know, maybe I am quite traditional and I don't like to admit it, but, you know, all of that is just, if it's important to you, then it's important. And you should stick to your guns. And if some of your family are a bit like, why are you doing that? Then it's your wedding. So yeah, so I will see you in the next one. So I think I know what I'm going to talk about. And I think I'm probably going to talk about the dress next. Because if anybody's asked anything, it's about the dress. So I think that's probably going to be the next one. So, but if it's not, then don't hate me. Thank you for all the support I've had from doing this video. People have been really lovely. So please continue to be lovely. And if you don't have anything lovely to say, then as my mother would say, don't say anything. But whatever. Anyway, bye guys.